My family accidentally discovered my $6 million contract with the county at Thanksgiving, when the governor called my dad after he couldn't reach me. Immediately, my parents demanded that I give half of the money to my sister, because she needed it more than I do, to revamp her failing vegan restaurant. I took a sip of water, then settled into my chair. They spent my entire life calling me the family failure because I chose construction over college. Keep watching to see the exact moment I watched my family's entitlement collide with a reality they had never dreamed of. And, a quick side note, feel free to subscribe to the channel at the end if you enjoyed the story. The dining room table groaned under the weight of roasted turkey, heavily buttered side dishes, and the suffocating tension that always accompanied our extended family gatherings. I sat near the corner of the table, wedged between my Uncle Patrick and the kitchen doorway, quietly eating my meal, while the rest of the room directed their collective attention toward my younger sister, Jillian. My parents hosted Thanksgiving every year in their expansive Illinois home, utilizing the holiday as a stage to broadcast Jillian's achievements to a captive audience of aunts, uncles, and cousins. For the first 18 years of my life, the broadcast centered on Jillian's academic superiority. She secured a place on the honor roll, scored in the top percentile on her standardized tests, and gained admission to an expensive private university. I struggled with traditional academics. I possessed a mind built for spatial reasoning and mechanical logic, traits that translated poorly to multiple-choice exams and standardized essays. My parents viewed my average grades as a personal insult, frequently pulling me aside to ask why I refused to apply myself like my sister. They treated my lack of academic prestige as a character flaw, berating me for bringing home report cards that failed to match Jillian's pristine transcripts. When I graduated high school, I declined their offer to co-sign loans for a community college business program I had no interest in attending. Instead, I packed my car, moved to Colorado, and joined the local operators union as an apprentice heavy equipment operator. My parents viewed my departure as a humiliating confirmation of my supposed lack of ambition. They stopped asking about my career after my first year away, preferring to change the subject whenever relatives inquired about my whereabouts. They poured their remaining financial resources into Jillian's university tuition. 4 years later, Jillian graduated with a degree in sociology, discovered she disliked the corporate job market, and convinced our parents to finance a high-end vegan restaurant in downtown Chicago. Sitting at the Thanksgiving table, listening to the conversation, the reality of Jillian's business acumen was on full display. Jillian pushed a serving of mashed potatoes around her plate, complaining loudly about the unfairness of the local commercial real estate market. She blamed her restaurant's plummeting revenue on uncultured customers, ungrateful employees, and aggressive vendors who demanded payment on delivery. My parents offered unending sympathy, nodding along as Jillian painted herself as a victim of a ruthless economic system. I remained silent, sipping my water. I knew the realities of business ownership. After completing my apprenticeship in Colorado, I purchased a used excavator, secured a modest commercial loan, and founded my own civil construction firm specializing in municipal water infrastructure. I spent the last 7 years working 80-hour weeks, navigating complex bidding processes, managing union payrolls, and steadily acquiring a fleet of heavy machinery. I kept my business entirely separated from my family, offering vague answers about working in construction whenever they bothered to ask. The meal progressed into a lull as my Aunt Linda began clearing the dinner plates. My cell phone sat dead upstairs, the battery drained from a long morning of delayed flights. I felt no urgency to charge it, preferring the temporary disconnect from my foreman and project managers back in Denver. Dad sat at the head of the table, his personal phone resting near his wine glass. The screen illuminated, vibrating against the wood. He glanced at the caller identification, furrowing his brow. He picked up the device, silencing the ringer. "Spam calls on Thanksgiving," Dad muttered, shaking his head. They spoofed the numbers to look official. The phone rang a second time, immediately after he silenced it. Dad let out a harsh sigh, swiped the screen to answer, and placed the phone on speaker mode to demonstrate his annoyance to the table. "I am in the middle of dinner with my family," he announced, his tone sharp and dismissive. "Remove this number from your list." A deep, authoritative voice echoed from the small speaker, cutting through the background chatter of the dining room. "I apologize for the intrusion on a holiday. Am I speaking with the emergency contact for Rachel Spoonbeard, the registered owner of Apex Earthworks?" Dad froze, his eyes darting toward me. The rest of the table fell silent, the aunts and uncles turning their heads to listen. "This is her father," Dad answered, his voice losing its aggressive edge. "Who is this?" The voice on the other end cleared his throat. This is Governor Mitchell of Colorado. My secretary has been trying to reach Rachel on her personal cell for the last 4 hours. Rachel's office directed me to her emergency corporate contact file. We have a time-sensitive press release going out tomorrow morning regarding the state infrastructure initiative, and I wanted to personally congratulate her before the news breaks. Dad let out a short, mocking laugh, looking around the table as if expecting someone to reveal a hidden camera. Is this a prank? Rachel drives a bulldozer. Why would the governor be calling my house? The line remained silent for a long moment, the tension in the room thickening. I assure you, Mr. Spoonbeard, this is not a prank, Governor Mitchell replied, his tone hardening into professional steel. Your daughter's firm just won the prime contractor bid for the Denver Municipal Water Main Replacement Project. We finalized the signatures this afternoon. It is a $6 million contract funded by the state public works budget. I needed her authorization to include her company's profile in our morning press briefing. The silence that descended upon the dining room was absolute, a heavy, suffocating quiet that pressed against the walls. My mother dropped her cloth napkin onto the table, her mouth hanging slightly open. Jillian stared at me, her eyes wide with a profound shock. Dad sat paralyzed at the head of the table, staring at the glowing phone screen, as if the device had just spoken in a foreign language. I pushed my chair back, stood up, and walked over to my father. I reached down, picked up the phone, and took it off speaker mode. I introduced myself to the governor, apologized for the dead battery, and confirmed my authorization for the press release. I kept the conversation brief and professional, assuring him my project managers would coordinate with his office on Monday morning. I ended the call, placed the phone back on the table, and returned to my seat. The extended family remained frozen, processing the massive financial figure that had just been broadcast across the leftover turkey. Dad was the first to break the silence. He leaned forward, bracing his elbows on the table. $6 million, he repeated, the numbers rolling off his tongue with a desperate hunger. You won a $6 million contract. I nodded, picking up my water glass. My firm won the bid. We replace aging municipal water lines. The state awarded us the project for the upcoming fiscal year. Mother shifted in her chair, her eyes darting toward Jillian before locking onto me. The dismissive, critical expression she had worn for my entire life vanished, replaced by a calculating intensity that made my skin crawl. Why did you hide this from us? Mother demanded, her voice rising in pitch. You let us believe you were just a common laborer. You sit here listening to your sister struggle with her restaurant, knowing you have millions of dollars sitting in your bank account. I placed my glass down, keeping my posture relaxed. I did not hide anything. You never asked about my company. You assumed I was a failure because I chose a trade over a university degree. Furthermore, I do not have $6 million sitting in a bank account. That is the gross value of the contract. It covers heavy machinery depreciation, fuel costs, surety bonds, material procurement, and the payroll for 45 union employees. My parents lacked the basic financial literacy required to understand the difference between gross revenue and liquid profit. They heard a massive number and immediately assumed I possessed limitless personal wealth. Jillian suddenly let out a sharp theatrical sob, burying her face in her hands. The timing was impeccable. Mother immediately rushed to her side, placing a comforting hand on Jillian's shoulder. Dad looked from Jillian to me, his jaw tightening. Your sister is facing eviction, Dad stated, his tone shifting from shock to authoritative demand. Her commercial landlord sent the notice last week. She needs a massive cash injection to revamp her menu, hire a new marketing team, and pay off her vendor debts. We have exhausted our savings, keeping her doors open. Mother looked up from Jillian, her eyes narrowing. You need to give her half, Mother ordered. $3 million will save her restaurant and secure her future. You have more than enough to share. This is the best time for you to support your family. The sheer audacity of the demand echoed through the room. They had spent a decade berating my intelligence, ignoring my achievements, and treating my chosen career as a source of deep familial shame. Now, upon discovering my success, their immediate instinct was to strip my business of its operating capital to subsidize Gillian's financial incompetence. No, I replied, my voice steady and unwavering. The single syllable hung in the air, sparking immediate outrage. What do you mean, no? Dad raised his voice, standing up from his chair. You owe your sister this opportunity. She has a college degree. She understands high-level management. Her business is just facing a temporary setback. You dig holes in the dirt. You do not need all of that kind of money. Transfer the funds to her business account on Monday. I looked around the table. My aunts and uncles looked away, refusing to intervene, silently endorsing my parents' demands. You do not understand how civil construction operates, Dad, I explained, refusing to break eye contact with my father. If I pull capital out of my firm, I default on my surety bonds. I lose the ability to purchase the miles of ductile iron pipe required for the project. I cannot pay my operators. The state will strip the contract, fine my company, and bankrupt me. I am not destroying a business. I spent 7 years building to fund a restaurant that fails because the owner refuses to work. Jillian snapped her head up, her face flushed red with anger. My restaurant is failing because the economy is terrible. You just got lucky playing in the mud. You have always been jealous of my success, and now you want to watch me lose everything. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Your restaurant is failing because your food costs are unmanaged, your labor percentage is double the industry standard, and you close your doors 3 days a week because you feel tired. You do not possess success, Jillian. You possess a hobby funded by our parents' retirement accounts. The argument exploded into a barrage of insults and threats. Dad pointed a trembling finger at my face, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. I am listed as your emergency corporate contact, Dad threatened, leaning heavily across the table. I have legal standing. If you refuse to support this family, I will hire an attorney. I will sue your company for a share of that contract. We housed you, we fed you, and we supported you. You will not disrespect us in this house. I stared at the man who had spent my entire adolescence telling me I would never amount to anything. The betrayal cut deep, not because of the hollow legal threat, but because it laid bare the exact parameters of their love. They did not value my hard work, my resilience, or the massive risks I took to build a reputable firm from nothing. They only valued me as a sudden, unexpected resource to be harvested for Gillian's benefit. I stood up, pushing my chair in. Being listed on a piece of emergency contact paperwork from 7 years ago does not grant you equity in a limited liability company, Dad. Any lawyer willing to take that case will just charge you retainer fees until you run out of money. I walked out of the dining room and headed up the stairs. I entered the guest bedroom, grabbed my travel bag, and retrieved my cell phone from the nightstand. I walked back down the stairs, finding my parents standing in the foyer, physically blocking the front door. Mother crossed her arms over her chest. If you walk out that door tonight, do not bother coming back. We will not maintain a relationship with a selfish, greedy child who abandons her own sister in her time of need. I stopped a few feet away from them, adjusting the strap of my bag on my shoulder. You abandoned me the day I brought home my first report card, I stated, my voice echoing in the high-ceilinged entryway. You decided Gillian was the investment and I was the liability. You funded her failures while I financed my own success. You do not want a relationship with me. You want a relationship with my balance sheet. I stepped forward, forcing them to either move or physically restrain me. Dad stepped aside, his expression hardening into cold resentment. Mother turned her face away, refusing to look at me. I opened the heavy wooden door, walked out into the freezing November air, and got into my rental car. I drove to the airport, booked a room at the Terminal Hotel, and flew back to Denver the next morning. I plunged into the execution of the water main project, working alongside my crews, finalizing material deliveries, and managing the massive logistical requirements of a state-funded contract. 6 months later, the inevitable reality of Jillian's business model caught up with her. I received the details through a rare text message from my Uncle Patrick. Jillian's restaurant officially declared bankruptcy. Because my parents had co-signed her commercial lease and personally guaranteed her vendor accounts, the creditors bypassed the bankrupt business and targeted my parents' assets. The bank placed a lien on their sprawling Illinois home, and my father was forced to liquidate the remainder of his retirement portfolio to avoid foreclosure. They attempted to reach out to me twice during their financial collapse. They left voicemails detailing their desperate situation, utilizing guilt, obligation, and eventual pleading to request a loan. I listened to the messages while standing on a massive job site, watching my fleet of yellow excavators trenching through the Colorado soil, laying the infrastructure that would supply water to thousands of homes. I deleted the voicemails without returning the calls. I built my life with my own hands, enduring their constant criticism and total lack of support. I refused to let their financial delusions dismantle the empire I created. The contract progressed flawlessly, cementing my firm's reputation across the state. I remained untouchable, separated from their dysfunction by 1,000 miles of geography, and the absolute certainty that true success is earned in the trenches, not handed out at a Thanksgiving table.